angler access, things like that, and identify limiting factors within the watershed, and specifically looking at our cold water tributaries. A unique attribute of the Clinton River watershed is that we have Paint Creek, which is one of the last remaining cold water trout streams in Southeast Michigan. And in addition to that, we also boast an urban steelhead fishery, which is also a very unique attribute of the watershed. And with those things in mind, we really wanted to form this project and bring together the key stakeholders like the Trout Unlimited chapters in order to positively impact those resources. So the partners and supporters of this project include us, the 4 local Trout Unlimited chapters, Michigan Department of Natural Resources, Metro West Steelheaders, Michigan Fly Fishing Club, City of Auburn Hills, Rochester, Rochester Hills, Oakland County, Eagle, and many more. I apologize if anyone's on the call that I missed. This project would not be possible without all of our partners. So looking into some past successes that we've had through CRCCP, we were able to work with DNR to establish special trout regulations on Paint Creek. We've had multiple stream bank restorations and in-stream habitat enhancements. And in a little bit here, I will invite anyone from Vanguard Trout Unlimited who would like to talk about their Paint Creek project that they have going right now. The Rudd's Mill Dam removal in Orion Township, that was a big win, removing some concrete remnants that were within Paint Creek and improving the habitat quality there. We do a significant amount of data collection on the Clinton River, Paint Creek, and several other tributaries. Recently, through this program, we've had discussions of starting to branch out towards the North Branch, which is also kind of a fishery that's been untapped to this point. Back in 2006, I believe, Michigan DNR did an extensive fisheries assessment study, which Khalil is going to be talking about some more recent data that's kind of related to that as we go on. And there's much, much more that's been accomplished through this partnership. Anything from stream and river cleanups all the way to educational presentations and educating the public on the value of these resources within the watershed. So with that, I wanted to highlight a few things from 2020, some of the things that we did through the CRCCP program. This is definitely not a comprehensive list at all. Our partner events, some of them aren't highlighted directly here, the things that the Trout Unlimited chapters did on their own, but I do want to specifically recognize their efforts. And I will say that the year was a little bit less than usual, obviously with the pandemic, so it's going to be a little bit of a shorter list. Start out with the temperature monitoring. Every year, the Watershed Council deploys 11 temp loggers that are specifically tied to our cold water fisheries. We also deploy temp loggers all throughout the watershed along the lines of like 50 to 60 locations to monitor water quality temperatures. But the 11 specifically for CRCCP has been going for many, many years now in order to monitor temperature fluctuations through the warmest months of the year. That's typically, I'll have them deployed in May, and then we run those temperatures through September. These loggers collect temperature every 15 minutes, and then we can graph that out to see how air temperature and flow fluctuations and things like that are affecting our fisheries. And we plan to continue to monitor temperature well into the future. This leads into a larger project that I'm going to touch on here in just a little bit. Paint Creek large woody debris management. Through CRCCP, we had 2 projects in 2020. One downstream of Silver Bell with Clinton Valley Trout Unlimited, and one downstream of Dinosaur Hill with Vanguard Trout Unlimited. Both of these were identified log jams that were starting to create issues, whether it be erosion or backing up trash, or in this case, it was actually up against the bridge abutments and starting to create issues with the bridge. We are very specific with the large woody debris management that we do. We try to leave as much wood in the stream for fish habitat as possible because it's a crucial limiting factor for habitat quality. But we do a lot of work to help to manage the amount of wood that's coming downstream. With the impacts of things like invasive species like the emerald ash borer, you see a lot of wood start to accumulate and that can cause dramatic habitat issues. And those are the log jams that we really try to focus on. In 2020, we had 20 volunteers between those two projects that were out in the river, as you can see in this picture, and helping us cut up that large woody debris and move it off to the sides up into the floodplain area. The Clinton River cleanup at Yates. This is a yearly cleanup where the Watershed Council partners with Metro West Steelheaders and MUCC. And this past year in 2020, even with the pandemic, we had our largest to date. We had over 60 volunteers show up on a Saturday morning to help us clean up the Yates Park all the way down the Clinton River Trail over by the cider mill. And you can see in this picture, we removed a significant amount of trash and litter. This year, we will have 2 cleanups at Yates in partnership with Metro West and MUCC. And those dates are going to be coming up later in the presentation. So in 2021, we have some opportunities for people to get involved. And I do want to say that CRCCP, it's manned and it's supported by all these local conservation and fishing organizations. However, we can always use volunteers at these events. So if you're interested in volunteering, please reach out to me. We have the CRCCP program and Adopt a Stream, which is another one that I'm going to get into right now, that we are in need of volunteers for. So in 2021, we've discussed a few large woody debris projects that are going to be coming up. We're going to have some bank stabilization and revegetation work that's going to supplement some of our larger scale restoration projects throughout the watershed. So we're going to need volunteers to help us out there. The Clinton River cleanup at Yates. So this year, like I said, we're splitting it into 2 events. So the first one's going to be April 17th, and the second one's going to be August 7th. That registration is being handled through MUCC, but if you reach out to me, I can direct you to the registration sheet. And then lastly, our Adopt a Stream monitoring program. That's a citizen science water quality monitoring program. And I know we have several of our longtime volunteers on the call tonight. We're in need of more volunteers for that program. That's our largest volunteer monitoring program. We usually have enough work for about 300 to 350 people twice a year. So if you're interested in that, once again, please reach out to me. My email will be at the end of this. Couple project highlights coming up in the next couple years that are related to CRCCP. The first one is the Bald Mountain Pond Dam. This project is a really cool project. It addresses an issue that was found many, many years ago, and through a partnership between the Watershed Council and Michigan DNR Fisheries, we've been able to apply to the Fisheries Habitat Grant Program for funding to go in and remove this dam and restore the banks back to their natural grade. We're in the full proposal stage right now. I just submitted that, so we're crossing our fingers and hopefully that funding will come through. But this is one of the projects that we very well may need volunteer help after the dam has been removed to revegetate those banks. This dam, once it's been removed, this will help to restore our natural flow and sediment regimes, as well as opening up fish passage to about 1.25 miles of headwater streams in Trout Creek. The dam itself is located within the Bald Mountain State Recreation Area. The Clinton River restoration at Yates. I know individuals from the Trout Unlimited chapters will probably be interested to hear about this one. This has been a project that was funded back in 2018, and due to a lot of moving parts with the project and then COVID, we've had some delays, but we're really hoping and crossing our fingers that we will go into construction this summer. The picture that you see here is the bank adjacent to Yates Cider Mill parking lot. And this project will restore this bank as well as add some in-stream habitat features here to really help to protect the river and reduce the amount of sediment loading that's coming off this bank. Hopefully our volunteer efforts would take place in the fall of 2021 or the spring of 2022. We've got a lot of plants that are going to be coming in to fill in this area. And I do want to say thank you to all the project partners, been so patient and great working through this. City of Rochester, Rochester Hills, HRC Engineering, the DNR, Eagle, Fish and Wildlife Service, Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. Great Lakes Fisheries Commission was instrumental in the closure of the bypass channel around the Yates Dam to help protect the upper reaches of the Clinton from invasive sea lamprey pressures. Some upcoming events in the year 2021. So you see on here the Adopt-A-Stream trainings. We are doing them all virtual this year with the exception of April 17th. The April 17th training will include a bug identification training, and that one's going to be held in our office. But the other ones are going to be virtual. And then Adopt-A-Stream monitoring, the spring monitoring date this year is going to be May 1st and 2nd. It's always the first weekend in May and the first weekend in October. So this year, May 1st and 2nd. And then River Day coming up on June 12th. There's going to be a lot of different events going on all throughout the watershed. I encourage you to get in contact with us and to participate in those. And I also wanted to just put it out there. I'll pause for a second. If anyone from the Trout Unlimited chapters would like to highlight any of their events coming up, please feel free to chime in. I don't know who's all on the call. Okay, hearing nothing, I will move on. So just to wrap up my piece of this, I really want to say thank you to all our volunteers across all of our programs, CRCCP, Adopt-A-Stream, Weekly Clean, Keeping It Clean, and our stream leaders, volunteers. And if I'm missing anyone, I apologize, but a lot of this work is made possible by you guys and your involvement with us. So thank you. And we're looking forward to the upcoming year and getting some impactful projects done. So with that, if anyone has any questions at all, Katie's been monitoring the chat and the Q&A, so you can enter your questions there or feel free to unmute yourself and ask. My contact information is right here as well. Feel free to reach out to me, eric@crwc.org, if you'd like to get involved in any of our programs. Katie, do we have any questions at this point?
The chat is clear right now.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? If not, I'm going to introduce our keynote. Okay, so tonight we have Cleo Harris, who's the fisheries biologist for the Lake Erie Management Unit, and he oversees the fisheries within our watershed. And we're really excited to have him here to talk about his crucial survey work that's been happening in the recent years. He's going to touch on a lot of different surveys and a lot of different information and things that we can glean from the data that he has. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Cleo, if you would like to share your screen.
Sure. It looked like you had one question pop in there in the chat, Eric.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody wanted to know if you have any projects going on in Independence Oaks and Clarkston.
Well, we do have several Adopt-A-Stream sites in Clarkston that need additional volunteers. We're going to be working on some projects through a partnership with Oakland County Parks coming up very soon, where we're going to be doing some stream monitoring with them on their properties, and one of them would be Independence Oaks. So if you're interested in getting involved in that project, reach out to me and I will loop you in on our discussions with the parks.
Okay, Eric, I actually work with the parks.
Okay.
I am the supervisor that oversees our citizen science team.
Perfect.
And I actually have a meeting tomorrow with Sarah Cook-Malin, who does our natural resources. So I will talk with her, but I think we have several volunteers that might be very interested in your Adopt-A-Stream. So I'll talk with her and see if we can kind of get something rolling to get a few more volunteers your way.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be awesome. I've been talking with Megan, Sean, and Sarah. So once you get brought up to speed, I'm sure we'll all be on the same page and it'll be an easy transition.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, looks like we actually do have a couple questions now, if there's some time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first one is, the water temperature in the Clinton River seemed especially hot last summer. Was there a fish kill as a result?
I'm gonna defer a little bit of this to Cleo. I'll give a 10,000-foot view of it. We did see last year, we saw some dramatic reductions in flows in the Clinton River, which can obviously help to raise those temperatures. We always see spring fish kills, but I don't know if there was necessarily a raise in fish kills due to an increase in temperature in the summer, but Cleo can probably talk to that a little bit better than I.
Yeah, we didn't have any big reports of any summer fish kills when we would see them from temperature issues. You know, I did hear of something in the kind of the lower portion that, you know, there's some, and I never got an actual report from somebody. I just talked to them as we were doing a survey in like Dodge Park. But yeah, I'm not aware of any issues. And, you know, that goes for Paint Creek as well. You know, one of the places we would be really concerned about a temperature issue, or even in Auburn Hills, and nothing came up from those anyways. So and I guess a really quick plug, if you do see fish kills when you're out on the river, by all means, report those to us. We want to track those, and we want to investigate and figure out if what kind of issues might be causing those, if it's natural or, you know, some point source too. So.
All right, I think that wraps up the questions for now. Maybe we can move on.
All right, well, Cleo, take it away. Thanks for your time tonight, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Absolutely. No, thanks for the invitation. And, you know, just can't say enough about the work that you guys do at the Watershed Council. I mean, you guys are a wonderful partner to have. And, you know, I count myself extremely lucky to have the resources that you guys provide. And, you know, I can't say enough. And, you know, for all of those, if you haven't been a part of these programs in the past, this is a top-notch program. And, you know, they do a lot of really good work, and it's really beneficial to the management of the river as well. So thank you guys. And with that, I'll jump into this. You know, so as Eric said, I'm one of the local fisheries biologists, and one of my main watersheds is the Clinton River. I cover my office covers the Lake Erie drainage, so we kind of go from Sanilac County, kind of on an angle down into Hillsdale County. We cover all the waters that dump into Lake Erie. So I have kind of that northern portion of our unit as under my area. So today I'm gonna share some information about the Clinton River. You know, kind of go through a quick overview of the watershed from the DNR perspective. Some habitat, like really gloss over some habitat stuff, just to let you know. For those of you that have been to these in the past, just some reminders of projects, you know, just to show people, you know, that there's a lot going on. I'll talk quickly about some fish stocking efforts that we do as part of our management in the stream. And then I'll get into some data that, you know, we had collected in the early 2000s, and really more focus on what we did from 2017 to 2020. So with that, you know, if you've been on the Watershed Council's website, you know that we have about 1.5 million people living in the watershed, which, you know, crazy populated in this area. And if you live here, you know that too. But the watershed covers about 760 square miles. And we have a ton of water. There's over 654 miles of stream in the Clinton River watershed, and over 14,000 acres of standing water, so lakes and ponds. So there's just a lot of water out there. And, you know, speaking of water temperatures, when we look at kind of the temperature regimes in the watershed, we see, you know, we have like 3 different types pretty much. And this is based off of modeling, you know, so some of the areas aren't completely accurate, and the model that is used doesn't really get to the headwaters very well. You know, and I'll point to up here in the very upper portions of the North Branch. We know that's cold water up there. We actually have brook trouts, natural population of brook trout up there. But when we look at it, we have one major cold water stream that is classified that way. And this is a cold transitional stream. That's Paint Creek, where we see natural reproduction of brown trout. And, so by cold transitional, what that means is the water temperatures, even in the summer months when it's really warm, typically stay below 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's that supports that cold water stream where we see browns and rainbows, and they do really well in there. And then we have this warm transitional stuff, and that's the green areas. And so warm transitional means that it tends to stay cool. When we hit those summer months, it can get over 72 degrees Fahrenheit sometimes, but it can be some cooler water. And in those areas, we often see some of those really marginal trout stream type of scenarios. And that's what we have, like, especially if you think of the Auburn Hills, kind of Rochester Hills area by Squirrel Road and all that stuff, and Innovation Hills. That's where we have, we do some trout stockings as well. And that's it's not perfect trout conditions every year. On a really hot year, we tend to have some issues there. But we also get, we also have some really good survival for most years there. And then, and so in the Clinton River watershed, that makes that warm transitional zone makes up about 26% of the stream miles. And then this red stuff, sorry, my phone's going off, is our warm water. So the majority of the Clinton River watershed is considered warm water. And that's when, in those summer months, we expect the water temperatures to get above 72 degrees. And that really impacts the types of species you'd be able to find there. But there's a lot of that, and that's in the summer months. So this doesn't touch on, like, we know we get really good steelhead runs that come up the Clinton River from Lake St. Clair. And even though that's warm water, and has that seasonal cold water. So just to let you know, and that's about 70% of the watershed is classified as warm water. So if we look at some ways that we manage the watershed with fishing regulations, I put up here these different colors now transition over to our trout regulations. And so this pink zone, which, was red for warm water, is, we have this identified in pink, and that's identified as a type 4 trout regulation. So it keeps a type 4 keeps fishing open year round, but it does put some additional restrictions on the possession limits. 3, you can keep 5 fish, but only 3 of them can be larger, 15 inches or larger, that kind of thing. But it allows us to have no limits on when people can target species like steelhead out there. And then we have type 1 streams, which is kind of that 32-mile road and upstream in the North Branch of the Clinton River. And then a good portion of the of Paint Creek and its tributaries are considered type 1. And so type 1 puts the kind of that traditional trout season on it. So, last Saturday in April through September. And that, having that season on there allows us to protect the spawning brown trout that we do see in Paint Creek, and brook trout that we see in the North Branch of the Clinton. And there's some browns in there as well. But so having that season in there like that protects the adults through the spawning period, and protects the area for fish to hatch out the next year too. So in addition, as Eric mentioned, we do have some gear restrictions, some special regulations on Paint Creek, and that is about a 5-mile stretch. And for that gear restriction section, it's the same season. So we the last Saturday in April through September. So it's the same season as a type 1. In that stretch, we just have some little tighter restrictions, where anglers can only use artificial lures, and the minimum size limit goes from 8, which for brown trout, which we see in a type 1, goes to 14 inches for this gear restricted section. And so that's just to offer a different fishing opportunity in Southeast Michigan, where we don't have a lot of trout fishing opportunities. And we know we can get larger fish in there. And so just to try to provide more opportunities for large fish to be caught. And the rest of the Clinton River, rest of the watershed is just managed under the standard state regulations. So it would be open, if in the Auburn Hills, kind of Rochester Hills area where we have brown trout as well. That area is open year round. So, if people, once Paint Creek shuts off, still want to fish in October, well, they can drop down to the Clinton River to fish for trout there too. So move on to some habitat projects. And I'm just really going to gloss over this. I don't want to focus on habitat projects, but that's kind of why we revisit some of our electro fishing sites. But in the Clinton River watershed, we've been really fortunate to have a lot of work done in the last few years. These stars highlights were, kind of just to show how they're kind of spread all over the place. And, the habitat projects, Eric went through a bunch that they do through the CRCCP programs. Those are all wonderful habitat projects. Some of these that I've highlighted with the stars are some of the larger projects that happened through the area of concern efforts that have gone on. Some of those are like dam removals, where we pull a dam out. This is Cascade Mill Dam on the North Branch. And then the stream gets restored after that so that we have good fish passage and we have, restore some natural channel through that area. Some of the other projects we see, focus on providing some floodplain, reconnecting some of the floodplain for the river, pulling out even larger log jams, stuff that you couldn't even think about handling through the CRCCP program. So, there's just quite a variety of different projects, but a lot has gone on. And so after all of that had gone on, we wanted to get back out there to see what kind of the response we would see from the fishery. So I'm not going to go into this too much, but I will tell you really quick about another type of management we do out there. Like I said, fish stocking. And the Clinton River watershed has a pretty long history of fish stocking. I pulled together what we have in our electronic database, and that goes back all the way to 79. We have fish stocking records from 1904 in Cass Lake. So we have some, there's been quite a variety of different fish species stocked in the Clinton River in the late 70s, early 80s. It was had a cool water fish focus where they were putting walleye, smallmouth bass, northern pike, and those species. And this graph only shows, so on the bottom, it's the year that fish were stocked, and then the number of fish stocked, and then it's a stacked bar chart. So it just kind of shows you these, multiple species that were stocked in that individual year. But you can see, this pink is northern pike, and this kind of bluish color here is walleye. And so that was the focus then. And then we started to transition a little bit more to cold water species, stocking into the main channel of the Clinton River, and have rainbow trout, which is more of our steelhead. Still doing a little bit of walleye. We have brown trout here. And then if you kind of fast forward, we switched over to just cold water species going into the Clinton River by 2000. And I'll note too that you see some of these big spikes. And if some of you folks are thinking, wow, we need to get back to steelhead stocking at those levels, pump the brakes a little bit. That's actually, those were fall fingerlings. Those weren't the yearlings that we typically stock. So these fish were only 2-3 inches, whereas the fish that we stock on an annual basis are 8 inches. Same, and then similar with these walleye, it's like 1 million fish almost, and but those were walleye fry. So the reason those are stocked at such high levels is the expectation of survival is extremely low, so you got to put huge numbers in. But we've transitioned to putting things in that we have a better reason that we'll have good survival. And that's kind of where we're at now. This includes a fall fingerling stocking there too, but for the most part, over the last 10 years, it's been, we stock on an annual basis, we stock steelhead and brown trout. That's kind of where our focus has been in the Clinton River watershed from a stocking standpoint. And again, this is only in the Clinton River. This is not including Paint Creek for numbers. This is not including some of the walleye programs we have in Cass Lake, some of the lakes in the upper part of the Clinton River watershed. So just to kind of show you really quickly where those are at, and it gives me a a reason to throw some pictures in there too. But for the main branch of the Clinton River, our current plan is to stock brown trout in these upper portions. So this is, like at Riverside Park and Innovation Hills are two sites where we stock brown trout every year. And then these 5 symbols up here, these are all the locations that we stock on Paint Creek. So I just wanted to show that. I didn't include the numbers, except for I will in a second. And then below, so this one is actually down at Ryan Road below Yates Dam. And that's where we stock all the steelhead every year. And what those numbers look like really quickly is, we put about 27,500. That's our target every year for steelhead going into the Clinton River. And then we put 5,500 in the Clinton River in that upper portion, Auburn Hills, Rochester Hills area. And for Paint Creek, we actually put 5,600 brown trout in there every year. And we hit those numbers pretty good. Outside of 2020, we were not able, or I'm sorry, outside of 2021, we will not be able to put steelhead in because we were not able to collect eggs due to the pandemic. So we'll miss a year there, but we were actually able to put over 30,000 steelhead in the Clinton last year. So that helps. So that's kind of what we do from the active management side of things. And now I'm going to move into kind of what our sampling and, our inventorying of the fish community in the Clinton River. And one of the main methods we use to do this is electro fishing. And that's the picture you can see here. We use, you can see these, the guys holding the probes and the nets. And what we do is we pump electricity into the water in a regulated way. And as we create these electric fields in the water, it causes the muscles of the fish to kind of pulse it stuns the fish pretty much. And since a lot of fish have swim bladders, they just kind of stop in the middle of the water, like stop where they're at, and they can't swim away. So they just kind of float. And as they're floating down the stream, we can net them up. And sometimes if the fish gets caught in the electric field just right, it'll actually swim right to the probe. So it's even easier to net. So we do this, and some of the limitations are, as you can see, we're wearing waders, and so we can only go as deep as our waders. And the deeper we go, it's actually, it's hard to function, right? If you have water all the way to the top of your waders, it's really hard to move forward. It's really hard to move to get a fish if it's trying to, get around you, or if it's floating down the middle, you got to reach over and get it. So, we get kind of limited to ideally 3 feet and less is where we like to do it. You hit holes and stuff that are deeper, and you can work together as a team to try to hit those deeper spots. But there are some limitations to this method, but the good part is that we can capture the whole suite of fish that are typically found in our streams, from little tiny darters all the way up to large northern pike and steelhead and things like that too. So it's really effective. So from 2017 to 2020, we sprinkled in some sites, and these are kind of what I call index sites that we did a ton of surveying in the early 2000s to try to collect a bunch of updated information for the Clinton River Assessment, which was published in 2006. And we're still using a lot of the management recommendations from there. So the sites that you see here are kind of cherry picked from there. Some of the sites that we thought, based on the habitat projects that have gone on and some of the differences in the some things that we know about the stream, we thought these would be good index sites to go to kind of show us some things. And so that's what these lightning bolts are. They're not Harry Potter sightings or anything. They're just our electro fishing sites, and to kind of put that into words to show you where they're actually at, if you're, depending on your familiarity. So this table is kind of working from upstream to downstream. So we have, Pontiac Lake Road and Cooley Lake Road on the main branch of the Clinton. So that's up in the lakes area. Then we drop down to this middle section here, and we have these two upper ones are actually on Galway Creek. And on the main branch, we have Riverwoods Park, Quail Ridge subdivision. And then this is at Livernois Road or Eagles Landing Park. And then what I kind of lumped in as our lower sites, we have, this is literally just upstream from Yates Dam, and then Dodge Park down there. And then this one is actually the middle branch of the Clinton River at 24 Mile Road. So just to kind of give you that spatial look, and I'll continue showing this a little bit as we move forward. But to kind of show you how that looks when we think about the temperature regimes. And so thinking of the different species we're going to catch, we kind of group it that way. So this is, again, lumping these into the lakes area where we have some typically warm water in between the lakes. We have a lot of lake influence on the species that we find there. And then we go into that warm transitional zone. We have multiple sites there. And then this one, again, is just above Yates and downstream. And that's kind of our warm, more riverine, typically warm river settings. So as we're collecting this data, one of the targets, one of the things we have in mind to do and how we're going to use the data is to run it through what has been identified, like what's been created as the Procedure 51. And this is a procedure, a way to index fish catch, and it goes beyond fish, but we focus on the fish because that's where our focus typically is. It creates these indexes and uses 10 measurements that help us evaluate the stream health. And ultimately, we take numbers from those 10 measurements, and we generate an index score that gets translated into, kind of categorized into excellent, acceptable, or poor health. And so it uses the population information to tell us what that water quality kind of is like and what the health of the stream is. And so that's, we collect the data knowing that's how we're going to process it. We also want to look at the catch per unit effort, and I standardize that by looking at, because some of the stream stretches, like on Galway Creek, I don't have to do as much of a length as I do on the main branch of the Clinton, but I want to compare that data a little bit. So I standardize that to the number of fish per 100 feet of stream electrofished. And I'm going to go into the Procedure 51 metrics and what that looks like here in a second, but just really quickly wanted to share that with you, why we're doing that and what that actually means. So when we do Procedure 51 kind of scoring, we're looking at that stream health. So, going back to our electrofishing sites, I'm going to focus in on this upper portion. I lumped those together so we can compare those at the same time. And so this is, from 2017 to 2020, these sites were actually done in 2019, both of them. But to cover the whole suite of those so that you can make a nice comparison. I kind of group things into that. But so what we do look at is, one of the main metrics is number of species. How many species did we catch? Is it really diverse, or is the diversity poor, suggesting that there's not a lot there? Some of the other things are the number of darter species that we see, like this is a rainbow darter up here, if you're not familiar with the darter species. We also look at the number of sunfish species. So like bluegills, crappies, warmouth, green sunfish, those types of species. Then the number of sucker species. So this is a spotted sucker, but we see, red horse, northern hog suckers, white suckers. There's a good variety of sucker species in the Clinton River watershed. So we look at that. And then the number of pollution intolerant species. So species that can't handle a lot of, need good water quality to thrive in a system. And so if we see a lot of those, that suggests that we have good water quality. So how many of those species do we see? And then continuing to move down the percent of pollution tolerant species. So if our catch is really dominated by these species that can live in a sewer, that probably isn't telling us a whole lot, or it suggests that we probably don't have a lot of intolerant species found there. So the health of the stream probably isn't that great. Or if, we have a lot of omnivorous species, which those are species that are, they eat algae, they eat a lot of quite a variety of different things, insects, algae, different stuff like that. So they can survive under a lot of conditions, especially some of the more unhealthy situations. We want to have that number low too. Then we look at the number of insectivorous species. And so this kind of goes into some of that information that the Watershed Council gets with the adopt a stream, looking at the bugs, and so do we have a lot of species in the stream that that's their, they're eating insects. That's their main diet. And if so, then we probably have some decent stream health because we're able to support bugs as well, because the fish aren't, if they're insectivorous species, they're not going to be there if the bugs aren't there either. So high numbers of that is a good thing. The percent of piscivorous species, do we have a lot of predators out there? So that's species like northern pike, largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, trout. So if we have a lot of them out there, then we have, we have to have forage there for them as well. If they make up a lot of the catch. So that's another good indicator for stream health if we have a good number of those. And then the percent of lithophilic spawning species. So this is species, that means species that can spawn in the stream. So if we have a lot of species that are in there that are able to, that do prefer to spawn in the stream, then we have good spawning habitat as well. So that's a good sign of good quality, good health for the stream. And so we take all of those are the metrics that we use. And, if we, for each metric, if it's good and it's based on the stream width, it's based on a few of the other, like the stream characteristics for the site that you survey. But we take those numbers and then, there's a chart to follow and we're able to assign a score, and the score can either be a 1, a 0, or a -1. So 1 is good, 0 is acceptable, and -1 is poor. So, we want it, the more ones we have, the better. And, Pontiac Lake Road, we see a lot of 1s, 0, so no negatives. That's really great. So that's looking good. For Cooley Lake Road, we still see a lot of 1s. We see a -1 there. So the number of sucker species, we only had 1, that's not that great. But when we look at things overall, it's looking pretty good. So we take that and we use this as an index for now, but we can also take the data that we collected back in 2002, 2001, 2003, that kind of time range, and we can look at those and make that comparison because we're using the same analysis to make that comparison. So when we do that, you can see here on the left, I have the Procedure 51 scores, and each of these bar graphs is set up so that the site name is on the bottom, and there will be 2 bars. One, this kind of orangish color is from 2001 and 2004, from that time period, and the blue bar on the right for each site is from 2017 to 2020. And so that I grouped that just so that these 3 charts are going to be similar for the next, for the middle section as well as the lower section, just so you guys can kind of figure out what's going on here. But so for the Procedure 51 scores, I have the scores here on the y-axis, and I have a horizontal line here at 4, and I put that there because as part of that indexing, anything above 4 is considered excellent health. Anything below 4, from 4 to -4, so you'll see some scores do go negative. That's considered acceptable, and then it can be trending, right? 0 would be flat acceptable, and if it's 2, then it's trending towards excellent, right? It's trending better. Or if it's -2, it's trending poor. But so what we see for, when we compare early 2000s to the more recent surveys, we see Pontiac Lake Road, big, huge jump. And so, that's in excellent health, looking good. Cooley Lake Road, we see a small drop, but the good part is it's still an excellent. And, these are single events, right? So we have to be careful, and we can't say, oh, it's starting to trend down, we got to be really worried. No, it's a categorical ranking. And so it's still an excellent condition. So yes, it did drop, but it's still an excellent. So we're still in good shape. And then we move over to the number of species, and in the Procedure 51 accounts for the number of species, but we like to look at that just because it's something that we can look at for species diversity everywhere. So we look, same thing, species count. So the different species we have is on the y-axis and set up the same way. But this time the horizontal lines mean something different. This horizontal line here at the top, the solid black one, is actually our regional average. So the average for the Lake Erie Management Unit. So an average stream, we would expect to see 19 different species in our unit. And what we see for in the more recent surveys, where both of those were over it. Cooley Lake Road, again, a slight drop, but not something to be that worried about. Still pretty good, still higher than average species diversity. And this dotted horizontal line actually represents the state average, which is about 13 species. So because of where we're at in southern Michigan, we typically, as example by this line being up here, we typically see a higher species diversity in our streams. So anyways, Pontiac Lake Road and Cooley Lake Road, both of those sites are looking really good as far as the, better than average for the number of species. And then we move over to the catch per unit effort. And that's just kind of, again, standardizing that our catch and looking at that. We did see an increase at Pontiac Lake Road and a decrease at Cooley Lake Road. And that could just be, could be for a number of reasons. There could be more vegetation at the site compared to the last time we did it. There could be something else going on. But with these other ones being really good and seeing a slight drop, something we'll keep our eye on in the future. But I don't think there's anything to be concerned about. So those two sites looking pretty good. And so that's encouraging. So then we'll move down the stream a little bit and look into that middle section in that warm transitional zone. And so just to remind you what those sites are, this is Riverwoods Park in Auburn Hills. This is Quail Ridge. These two sites are on Galway Creek. One is at Squirrel Road, and the other one is through the golf course where a large habitat project for the AOC had occurred. And so we hadn't done that site previously, so we included that one in just to get some fish collection right in amongst the habitat work that was done. But so that one's on the Oakland University golf course, and then this one is at Livernois Road or Eagles Landing there. So to bring that those same metrics up and just kind of, I'm not going to walk through the metrics again, but I'll walk you through the scores, and we'll go by each site. So the first three are the Clinton River sites. And so we look, kind of looking down, number of species is looking good. We're looking good. Number of sucker species, it's still in that, at that acceptable range. It doesn't take a lot of suckers to make it acceptable. One more sucker species and it would have gotten a 1. But that's how the metric works. And there's a lot of data that is behind these. This isn't based off of just our streams. This is based off of quite a variety of streams across the whole state. But so ultimately we don't, we see a lot of 1s, 0s, but we do have a couple of negative ones. So we didn't see a lot of insectivorous species or piscivorous species. And honestly, for both Riverwoods and Quail Ridge, they both got a -1 for piscivorous species. This is where we stock brown trout. We don't expect to see a lot of bass or pike in those areas. That's why we stock trout there too, because trout's a soft rayed fish. It's like fish candy for some of those larger predators. So we wouldn't want to see it's good to not have a lot of predators there just based on the type of management we're doing. So, but ultimately, still more positive than not. A couple of negatives. So, maybe not as many insects as we would like in that area for whatever reason, and acceptable at Quail Ridge, but still lots of 1s and 0s. So that's encouraging. Move down to Livernois Road, and we still, no negatives here. Very encouraging. See some 0s, so we have some acceptable ranges, and we have some that are good. Number darter species, things like that. So ultimately, that the Livernois one's looking good. We can move to Galway Creek. It's a little different story. 0s, still a lot of 0s, but we see a few more negatives in here. Still insectivorous species, the piscivorous species seem to be really, really low, and we'd want those up higher. The number of sunfish species, so like your bluegills and things like that, they really weren't there when we did the survey. And then so the Galway Creek, this is at Squirrel Road. Number 1 is at Squirrel Road. And then number 2 is on Oakland University. So this one's right in the middle of a habitat project that we did. And you see a lot of 0s here, and only a couple of 1s with 1, and then a couple of negatives. So the number of sucker species, we only had one, and it was a pretty common one. White suckers, number of intolerant species, we only had one. So, those are numbers we hope to see increase. And some of that could be that we did the survey and maybe the site the fish community hadn't quite responded fully to that, to the habitat work that had gone in there. And there's some other issues too that we see happening throughout the watershed. And I'll get to that here in a second. I'll jump to those graphs, set up again the same way with the procedure 51 scores, the number of species, and the catch per unit effort. So River Woods Park, it was actually at 0. That's why you don't see a bar. But we saw an increase there. So, it bounced up to 3. So it's heading in the right direction, getting closer. It's still unacceptable, but it's heading towards excellent health. Quail Ridge was at -2, and we see that jump all the way up to a +3. So again, heading in the right direction. We're getting towards that excellent health per stream. And then if we look at Livernois Road, it went from a 1, and it actually broke that threshold and bounced into the excellent health categorization. So looking really good there. When we look at Galway Creek, when we did that in 2000 and in the early 2000s, that was at a -1 and at Squirrel Road, and we didn't see any change. It stayed at -1 at Squirrel Road. So, nothing. We just didn't see a change there. And part of that could be we did see a lot of mobile sediment in that area. It looked like that Galway Creek had, some of the flashiness was really taking its toll on some of the habitat in the stream. So that could still be a factor that we noted when we were out there. And there's some more teasing out to compare this data that I'll have to do. And we'll have to follow up with some more survey work too. But so that might be an issue. And then if we move into the number of species, River Woods and Quail Ridge, we see increases, which is really, really encouraging. There was some habitat work done there by some of the TU groups and Auburn Hills. Quail Ridge was a control site where no habitat work was done. River Woods Park did have habitat done. But in that area, we see a good response for the fish community. Livernois Road, number of species count was the same. So, nothing major there. We did see a small dip in the number of species for Galway Creek. Again, we did observe some stream issues. So now, we'll have to look into that more and probably follow up some more survey work too, to kind of more dive into this a little deeper. But you see, in the on the university golf course area, that habitat section, it was right at the state average, but nowhere near the regional average. And so that's a little bit of a problem. But again, that could be that the habitat work is still fairly new. So the fish community might still be responding to that as well. So we'll keep our eye on that a little bit more. When we look at catch per unit effort, River Woods and Quail Ridge both up again. So those two sites are looking really good. We did see a drop at Livernois Road and in Galway Creek. The drop at Livernois Road, that one of the things that we see, because it is such an urban stream, we see a lot of, the stream is extremely flashy. If you spent time on the river, how flashy this river can be. And so what happens sometimes is it does change the morphology of the stream in those sites. And, we're talking at least 13 years between the survey times. So a fair amount can change. And what we did see were some of the deeper pools were especially at Livernois Road, they were so deep that we couldn't wade into them. So it was kind of there was a limitation of our equipment there. Last time we had gone through it in the early 2000s, we were able to get through the whole site without having to skirt around a deep pool. When we did it in 2020, there were a couple of pools that we had to completely get out of the river and walk around. We couldn't shock. What that also does is when we're electro fishing, sometimes the fish feel that electricity before we get to them, and they continue up the river until we get to like a riffle or something where they don't want to go any further. And then that's when we get a bunch of them at one time. When we can't get into these pools, it causes situations where we're missing fish a lot more regularly than we would like. And so there were a couple of situations, especially at Livernois Road, where we had that. So it's not great to see our catch per unit effort and our, that catch per unit effort going down, but we did see a good species accounting in there. So I wouldn't contribute it to a lack on the Clinton River. I would contribute it to just a limitation of our gear at that site. Galway Creek, we didn't have that as much. I still think there's some other issues there that we'll have to continue to look into. So keep moving down the stream. I clustered together in this next grouping, the just above Yates, Dodge Park, and the middle branch of the Clinton River. So looking at that one, here's the same table just for those sites. When we look at above Yates, number of species, 25, that's great. We see lots of ones, some zeros, no negatives. So we're looking really good there. We moved downstream on the Clinton River to Dodge Park. Same thing, lots of ones and a few zeros. We're looking really good there too. Still have a decent number of species. Might think as we get down the river, we'd see a few more because the river is even bigger at that point. But we didn't. But then when we get to middle branch of the Clinton River, we see the highest number of species. And in the 2000s, when we did this site, this was one of the best sites that we did as well. So we're kind of looking at this one as well. But for the score, we see lots of ones and then a few zeros at the end. So, but no negatives. Really impressive to see this without any negatives there. And so, what's that look like when we compare to the early 2000s? For the procedure 51 scores, we see nothing but increases. And above Yates was already an excellent, based on procedure 51, was considered in excellent health. And that continued and actually got better. It climbed all the way to 8. Dodge Park was in the acceptable range, kind of getting close to the excellent, but we punched over that line and got into the excellent category. And then for the middle branch of the Clinton River, while we caught the very high number of species at that site in the early 2000s, it actually got a 0 for the procedure 51 ranking. So we had a lot of species, but the species there we had a lot of pollution tolerant species. So that species composition was different than what we had now. And so in 2020, when we did that, the results from that show that stream in excellent health. And when we go to looking at the number of species, seeing an increase at Yates Dam and the numbers above the state average as it was, not much of a slight decrease at Dodge Park, roughly the same. That's not at Dodge Park, we had a similar issue that we had at Livernois Road. We kept pushing into this one hole and it just kept getting deeper and deeper. And finally we had to get out and get around. Unfortunately, one of the deep holes was right at the end of our station. So we pushed fish into this hole and then couldn't finish it because it got too deep. And then the middle branch of the Clinton River, number of species, like I said, it was really high last time we did it in the early 2000s. We increased one species, but well above average, looking good there. Then when we go to the catch per unit effort, I think this is where it really shows on those species that we like the catch we weren't able to get. Yates Dam had a similar issue. There were a number. There was we actually had to go above the area where the bypass around the dam had gone through, and some of those areas were just a little too deep for us. And some of that was, we kept waiting for the river to come down to do the survey. We knew it was a deeper site. And so we kept waiting, and finally it got onto a level we thought we could do it. And it was still a little too deep, which makes it tough. But that being said, there's still a lot of fish diversity in that area. And same with Dodge Park. We had a fair diversity there. Our catch per unit effort was down. I'm not that concerned just based off of some of our limitations. Middle branch of the Clinton River is a lot smaller. So we would expect to see, expect to have good, a good reasonable chance at catch per unit effort. And that actually increased a lot, almost doubled from the early 2000s to 2020. So bring all this together, all these sites, what does that kind of look like for us? We see, we had in general for the Clinton River, some positive scores, things are looking better there. Catch per unit effort based on our surveys, the change we saw was our catch per unit efforts were lower. They were different. They were less. Number of species, we typically saw an increase. So overall change, we think we're seeing an overall positive response in the river based on the fish community, which is wonderful. So, same thing for the middle branch on all of those parameters. We saw an overall change that was positive. So things are looking up in the middle branch. On Galway Creek, slightly down. Our procedure 51 scores were the same. We have even with that, we had less fish and less species diversity. So overall change is down. And again, that's something we'll have to look into a little bit more. It's not saying that this isn't indicative of what happened with the habitat projects. This is just, kind of a state. There's more, these rivers are really complex and there's a lot of things going on. So we'll have to continue to look at it, but that's what our data shows us right now is an overall change that actually decreased in the quality in Galway Creek. So with that, I'll stop boring you guys with a bunch of data analysis, kind of look into some things that are coming up next. If you're a steelhead angler, I really encourage you to look into this. We have the Great Lakes Angler Diary. This is some effort that's being brought out across the state on all of our Great Lakes tributaries to look at the steelhead anglers and get feedback, catch information from them. So they're collecting steelhead angler data, and it's an angler diary program. So again, if you're interested, reach out to me and my contact information will be at the end of these slides. It's going to be some really good data. It's information that we really struggle. When we think of a fishery, it's not just the fish and the habitat. It's like a three-legged stool. There's the fish, the habitat, and the people, the anglers. And so that's one component that we miss. And it's been really hard for us to get back to looking at some of the angler effort out there. So on that same note, started working with the Vanguard chapter of TU. We're going to start looking into an angler diary program to kick out for Paint Creek and the Clinton River. We don't want to I'm not trying to step on the toes of the steelhead, the Great Lakes Angler Diary. I would really encourage, if you steelhead fish, focus on that one. And then once that program's done, because it's only like a 5-year program, then we'll roll you into this other angler diary program. But it'll be this for the start out of this, we're going to be focused more on the Clinton River as far as the brown trout fishery in the Auburn Hills, Rochester Hills area, and Paint Creek for this one once we get it off the ground. We're just starting that process. Thinking of some of our next rounds of electro fishing in the near future, next few years. We'll be getting back into Paint Creek to do a trout evaluation in there. We switched over to the Sturgeon River strain of brown trout from the Gilchrist strain. So just looking, does that change of strain, the fish are going in at about the same size and everything, but do we see a response in the number of adults that we get into the stream? One of the reasons we stocked Gilchrist strain in there was because that we were able to get more fish to the adult size. So that increased the number of spawning biomass that we had, the number of adults we had to actually spawn and increase our natural reproduction, which is our main goal. Our stocking is only there to supplement natural reproduction. So we'll be looking at that in the next few years. And then, we'll continue looking at habitat evaluations, to probably getting back into Galway Creek at some point. And then looking for opportunities with our partners. Again, we're fortunate to have the Watershed Council among a host of other partners that we do a bunch of work with. And so just look for those opportunities when we can do some more habitat projects. And, just a quick plug while I have your ears, fishing licenses, the new licenses for 2021 are going on sale. So make sure you get those. We actually have an auto renewal option too. So if you're an avid angler and you're going to go out there every year, you can click auto renewal and you don't have to worry about it. you'll automatically get your fishing license each year. We also have youth licenses out there. If you're not aware, our all of our stocking programs, our research programs and things like that are based off of our fishing and hunting license sales. So one thing we brought back were anglers don't have to have a license until they're 17. But if you want to buy a license, that gives us that the numbers of licenses that we sell goes into the federal equation for the amount of federal match we get for sport fish restoration. So we can use that, not only use that money to leverage our match for federal money, but we can also use it as part of that equation to get us a little more federal money coming to the state. So if you have kids, or if you're on this and you are someone that's younger than 16, look into it. If you got a few bucks to spare, buy a license that helps us with some of our fish management efforts as well. And then, I think we hit on this already with the fish kill part too, but all of you volunteers are, we need your support, and your reporting is very much needed. You see something that doesn't look right, you see a species out there that you don't think should be there, or you're not sure what it is, reach out. We have online applications where it's eyes in the field. You can report fish kills, anything like that. On the next slide is going to have my contact information. Send me an email. If you're not sure what a fish is and you want it ID'd, send me an email, give me a call. I'll be glad to talk with you, glad to figure out if that's something that's, native, do we have a new invasive, things like that. You guys, there's a lot more eyes looking at me right now than I have even close in my office, and we can only get to so many places throughout the course of a year. So your support's really, really needed and encouraged. And with that, as promised, there's my contact information. That's we're not working in the office, so the number there is actually my work cell phone. So feel free to call me on that. If I'm during work hours, I will answer it. If I can't get to you, I will definitely give you a call back. And that's my email address. And that's an easy way to get a hold of me too. So with that, I'll open up for questions. Hopefully I didn't bore everybody too much.
Cleo, that was fantastic. Much appreciated. I think everyone here enjoyed it. And if we were all in person, they would all be standing and clapping. But we'll get to questions here in just a second. I just wanted to touch base on a couple things that Cleo mentioned because I didn't during my presentation. For a little bit of background, the data that he gave today is really impressive when you think about back in the 60s and the 70s when the DNR did a fish survey in the Clinton and did not find a single living fish from Lake St. Clair all the way to Pontiac. And now we're looking at conditions that are tremendously better than that. The other thing I wanted to say is Cleo mentioned these large-scale habitat projects that have occurred, and that happened through the Area of Concern program through the US EPA. And through that program and through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative in general, there's been almost $43 million invested within the Clinton River watershed for restoration efforts. And what's really cool about those projects and the partnerships that they've built is the data that Cleo just talked about and working with the Procedure 51. I use that Procedure 51 to analyze those habitat projects and look at the macroinvertebrates. So everything that you just heard from Cleo can be hand in hand with the data that I have. And that's really going to give us insights into the impacts of these projects moving forward. And the one thing I will mention, just to kind of back up some of the things that he was saying, specifically about Galway Creek, in the literature, most of the literature is kind of aiming towards most restoration projects need about a 5-year recovery period before you really start to see species start to respond to those projects. So it's not something to cause a tremendous amount of alarm. And I just wanted to reiterate that and let everybody know that, Cleo, myself, and Eagle will all definitely keep an eye on all of those projects moving forward. So with that, I will open it up for questions to Cleo and also to myself if anybody has anything else to ask. Katie, do we have anything in the chat?
Yeah, we do have a couple things in the chat. First, I'd like to point out that Jorg Hensel shared with us the Clinton chapter of Trout Unlimited's scope of work for volunteering this year. So that is a PDF that I put in the chat a little while back, but if anybody wants to access that, you can just click on it. And then we will start with the questions. So there's 2 questions that revolve around the electroshocking. The first one is, what time of year do you do your shocking?
Yeah, that is a good question. It's something I completely had in my notes, but I didn't say. So for the sites that I showed there, we do our electro fishing typically, July, August, when we're, closer to base flows, partly because, we need to be able to wade through to get to those sites. And that gets us the fish community that is that stays in the stream. We're not getting the seasonal migrations of things like steelhead, northern pike, smallmouth bass that will come up from Lake Sinclair or anything like that. So that's for a general fish community evaluation. When we do some of the trout surveys, we can extend that into September, October a little bit more, just because we're looking at a cold water species. We're not that worried about the temperature regime and things like that, and how that's going to impact the fish community. So hopefully that answered your question.
Thanks. Okay, the second one about electrofishing is, once fish are stunned and counted, are they returned to the stream? In other words, after being stunned, do they return to normal life after a certain amount of time?
Yeah, it's pretty much as soon as you get them out of that electrical field, you pull them out of the water and they're going crazy in your net. Sometimes we have to give them a quick little jolt so we can measure them really quick and then get them back. We usually do it. Sometimes if we don't have enough people, we have a live tank that we use on our tow barge, and we'll fill that with water and just store fish in there until we get a certain distance or too many fish, and then we'll process them all at one time. But they all go back alive. But usually what we do is we'll have somebody with we call it a belly board, and it's just a board they put so it's right at their fingertips, and we're just dumping fish into their net, and they're grabbing them and measuring, and someone's writing data as we go. So they're all being returned in back behind where we're shocking, so we don't catch them again. But they all come back to life really quickly. It's really, really rare that we get mortalities because of this effort. There's been a lot of science behind this to look at what levels are appropriate. You can turn the electricity up high enough to where you do kill fish. We don't want to do that, so we keep it at a level where it's not going to drastically reduce our catch, but we're not going to harm the fish as well.
All right, and this is the final question in the chat for Cleo or Eric. I'm shocked to see that the whole North Branch is considered warm. Is it due to shallower or slower flow, or farms, lack of vegetation, or something else?
I can take the first stab at that, Eric. That's what I did try to point that out, that we know that portion, like 32 Mile Road and upstream from there, kind of north, I guess, as you go towards Almont, should probably be identified at least as warm transitional. It's more represented by a cooler water, cold water fishery. And then as you get into the headwaters of the North Branch, that's really cold, cold enough that it's supporting brook trout, which, they need like 60 degrees and less year round. So we know that that's really cold. And so that's an issue in the model that's used to generate those classifications. But, we know based off the fish community, based off of temperature logger deployments and stuff, that's not the case. So that model just gets us kind of in the ballpark for the most part.
Yeah, I think Cleo covered it very well. The only thing I would add is in the North Branch, we're starting to look at that stretch a lot deeper when it comes to fish habitat and doing a lot of work through there. I think land use contributes a lot to degradation throughout the watershed and even in the North Branch. I mean, you think our watershed, 1.5 million people, is extremely developed. However, the North Branch sub-watershed is significantly rural in the headwater area for the most part. Lots of agriculture. And that means that a lot of that riparian canopy in areas has been removed. And those areas get a lot of sunlight, and not to mention that it experiences extremely flashy flows, which a lot of times can really wipe out those bed form features, like the pools that help to keep those waters cool. And you'll get more of a stagnant single sheet of water moving, if you will. We call it laminar flows. But that's something that we're going to be looking into in the future, though, because there's lots of areas there that would be potential candidates for habitat projects, specifically thinking in like the Wolcott Mill area, where we've had some discussions about doing some additional survey work.
Okay, we got a couple more questions. Which of the state hatcheries do most of the fish come from?
So the steelhead come from our Wolf Lake State Fish Hatchery over by Kalamazoo. The brown trout typically come from our Odin hatchery up in Tip of the Mitt in northern Lower Peninsula. And we do also sometimes get fish. We occasionally get, our hatcheries have a broodstock program. So instead of getting all the eggs from the wild like they do for steelhead, they actually have, they keep adults on the hatchery premises. And then, you know, keep them around to get the, collect eggs from them to then raise into fish that we stock out. So sometimes they have to rotate those fish, those what we call broodstock, out as adults. Again, so knowing that we have a lot of people, we try to grab a bunch of those fish, and we do stock those down here. And those fish will come from Harrietta, which is over by Cadillac, as well as Odin. So that for the Clinton River main channel, that's where all of those fish come from. We do get some fish from Marquette for like Mesa Day Lake. We stock lake trout and splake in there, and those come all the way from Marquette. But for the most part, it's Odin and Wolf Lake.
Okay, so we have another question. Is there any risk for invasion of the jumping silver or Asian carp to the Clinton River watershed in the next decade or so?
So for that, you know, the jumping carp are a suite of they're called Asian carps. The ones that we're really worried about, and a lot of the focus is over in Chicago, are the big head and silver carp. Silver carp are the ones that actually go flying out of the river. They are not in the Great Lakes at this point. As far as we can tell, and there's a lot of effort that gets put out there looking for environmental DNA to see if we can find, just find their slime. We don't have to find the fish. We can just find their slime in the water. We have a ton of effort going on the administrative side, providing funding in to Chicago. We just entered a new agreement with Illinois and the Army Corps to help provide some money to, really push that initiative to keep them out of the Great Lakes. Because once they get in, it's like gobies, right? Like gobies are now above Yates. That's one species. I didn't include it in here, but we now see round goby above Yates, where before that bypass opened up, they weren't able to get up there. But once they're there, to get them out, we'd have to kill off the whole Clinton River to get them out. And then we'd have to kill off all of Lake St. Clair and Lake Erie. Like it's not realistic once they get in. And there's too many of them to try to remove as well. So the idea is to prevent them from getting in. So the big head and silver carps, they're not here. We do have grass carp, which is another cousin to big head and silver carps. We do find them in Lake Erie, and we do find them naturally reproducing in like the Sandusky River. We have a massive initiative working with multiple stakeholders around the Great Lakes, Great Lakes Fish Commission, a bunch of people to try to, we think we've caught them at an early enough stage where we might have a chance to eradicate them. So we're giving that, like we're kind of throwing the kitchen sink at them, trying to remove as many as possible and understand them, understand where they're at. We have a lot of different initiatives, but working on eradicating them. They are here. There's a chance that we eventually could see one of them in the Clinton River. I've done a bunch of telemetry work on grass carp in Lake Erie. We don't see them leaving Lake Erie very often. We had one fish that went all the way up to Lake Huron, but for the most part, they stay in the Detroit River and down in Lake Erie. So, if you see something that you think is, by all means, let us know. We get a lot of gizzard shad are often, because they will jump out of the water and they spook really easy too. So they have that kind of body form. So people often see them and think that they're a silver carp or a big head carp. And that's fine. You get a picture, by all means, send it to me. I have no problems working through Fish ID with people and explaining why, what characteristics make up certain different species. So.
All right, that looks like that's it for the chat questions.
All right. Well, if anyone has any additional questions and wants to unmute, feel free to break in. Katie, was there?
We got one more.
Okay.
How robust is the population of muskie in Lake St. Clair?
It's really robust. I mean, it's a world-class fishery out there. It's so robust that that's where we actually collect. That's where we collect our eggs and milk from to stock muskies throughout the whole state. It's a really impressive fishery. We don't have solid population numbers on that. We are working through that. We have some new research initiatives that are working towards getting some population numbers, but that's, we had to get Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry involved with that as well, because they have 2/3 of Lake St. Clair. So they're a big component of that initiative as well. But it's huge.
I think that's it now.
Katie, I was curious, you said something about there was a Clinton Valley TU list of volunteer opportunities somewhere. Where should I look for that?
Do you know how to access your chat? There's a toolbar at the bottom.
I looked at chat, I didn't see it.
Okay, so if it's, I'll drop it in again, but if you scroll up, it was dropped in about 6:30, so there's been quite a bit of messaging going on. But I will go ahead and redrop that again. And if you don't see it, John, send me a message or go ahead and unmute yourself and let me know, but I'll work that.
All right. Is there any other questions from anyone that wants to unmute? All right. Well, thank you everybody for participating tonight and hanging out with us. And a huge thank you to you, Cleo, for the presentation and for all the information. We truly appreciate your time and we truly appreciate all of your efforts in working throughout our watershed for sure. And to everyone who's on the call, please feel free to reach out to Cleo or myself. And if you have any questions, want to get involved, or just need some more information, let us know. And we hope to see you throughout the watershed in 2021. So thank you guys, and everybody have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. John, are you able to see that?
Yes.
Got it? Okay.
Yeah. When I scrolled up, it started right after that one, apparently.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
I downloaded it. I'm sure it'll be there.
Okay, good. Bye. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.